Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is this week's series of our PV Path to Health and Wellness. And it's my pleasure to introduce Kim Porter, who is the Executive Director of Be a Part of the Conversation. And this evening, the presentation will focus on cannabis and its impact on young people's brains. So without further ado, Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome. Thank you. And we're looking forward to all that you can share with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boyd. It's great to be with you. I really appreciate the introduction. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see that, Dr. Boyd? Yes. Okay, great. All right. So yes, my name is Kim Porter. I'm the Executive Director of Be a Part of the Conversation, and I'm really excited to be back with you guys. It's been a couple of years. We used to be right there with you at the high school, often meeting in the library, and wasn't that nice when we could all be in a room together? So I love the school district. It's really been a pleasure, and I hope that we'll be back in person one of these days. I think that we probably will, but I know that we have the ease of Zoom, and it's nice to have this recorded. We are recording this program, so we will not be seeing any of your questions in the recording, so feel free to submit any of those in the chat or in the Q&A throughout the program, and Dr. Boyd and I will kind of keep an eye out for those, but those will not be shown on the recording, and we will not be using your names if we're addressing any of the questions. So we are recording this, and it will show up on that page on the district site. That's the /community/path. You know what? I'm not going to do it now because I'm sharing my screen. When I stop sharing, I'm going to paste some links into the chat for you that'll have a direct link to that, but that's where the recording will be. I'm also really happy to share the slide deck, so I can turn this into a PDF and send that out to anyone. I don't know if there's a way to collect emails for people who are interested. I don't know. We'll figure out a way to share it with you, maybe on that follow-up page. But you'll also see at the end of this, I don't know if you've done this with other programs as part of this wellness program, but we do like to conduct surveys to ask for your feedback. It really helps us to know if this was helpful to you, what you might like to hear about in the future, any feedback at all that you would like to give us. We really welcome that. So that survey link will actually pop up at the end of this program. So we really appreciate you taking a few minutes to complete that. So thanks in advance. I want to let you know just about a couple of things that are coming up. I know this is listed on your site as well. Our organization is going to be partnering with a couple of other community members, grassroots organizations in Upper Perkiomen. So this will be in partnership with Project Live and some other folks. But thanks, Dr. Boyd, and whoever did this, for posting it on your site. We're going to be giving a tour virtually. This is on Zoom, of our mock teen bedroom. And we're going to be also talking about what are the tools that parents need to have conversations with kids if you should find something in your son or daughter or child's bedroom that looks like it might be some substance use. So hopefully you'll be willing to join us for that, also online, as I said. And another Zoom program that we have coming up is on Thursday, May 19th. This is in partnership with Montgomery County's Office of Drug and Alcohol. We're going to be talking about underage drinking. And alcohol is still the most used substance by young people. It is getting better. Alcohol use is decreasing with young people. We're going to be talking about cannabis tonight, which has kind of been steady, not decreasing the way we'd like to. But alcohol is still the most used substance by kids. So we'll be talking about that online on May 19th. All of these kinds of programs you can find on our website. And again, I'll put all these links in the chat for you when I'm not sharing my screen. I also like to remind folks that if you're interested in talking with other parents who are impacted by substance use, so if you're worried about your son or daughter, you identify that they definitely have a problem with drugs and or alcohol, we really need each other. I'll be telling you a little bit about my story in a moment, but I've been attending these meetings for 12 years now, and they help me tremendously. They are taking place, some online. All these green buttons on this calendar show you Zoom meetings. The purple buttons are in person. There's one hybrid meeting, but they take place weekly, as you can see, and that link on our website will give you more information. So as I said, this is personal for me. This is an old picture of my family. My son is now 33. My daughter is now 30. And this was after my son he was the drummer in a jazz ensemble in high school. So this was after a band concert. We went to Baskin Robbins. We got some ice cream. And the reason this photo is really relevant to this conversation tonight about cannabis is the first time Daniel got high, he was 13 years old. It was a year before this photo was taken. And I didn't know. I had no clue. I was a room parent. I was the co-president of the Home and School Association. I worked from home. His dad's a physician. We are paying attention as parents, and we knew nothing about his substance use until he was 18 years old. By that time, it was getting to be pretty clear, finally got our attention. But I just want to point out, please don't beat yourselves up if it takes a while to pick up on these things, because sometimes these substances feel good to kids until things start to go badly. And that's exactly what happened with us. And I'm really happy to tell you that he is doing beautifully. He celebrated 12 years in recovery back in March. This is him with his fiance, Chloe. They live in Colorado. Ha ha ha. Yes, the most frequently visited state for cannabis use, right? That is the sort of cannabis capital of our country. He's out there for the outdoors. He's a skier and hiker, and he's living a very good life. And I'm eternally grateful that he accepted the offer of treatment and got sober 12 years ago. And he has launched. So we're very grateful for that. But that's why I love talking about this and love talking with all of you about this. So just for some context, here we are in Pennsylvania. And as you know, I'm sure you've noticed that we have medical marijuana legalized here in Pennsylvania. New Jersey just on Monday started selling recreational cannabis. So, and I'm going to talk about recreational. I can't believe I just caught myself saying that. It's adult use. We're not going to use the word recreational because that gives the wrong message to our kids. Adult use marijuana was legalized in New Jersey and just began being distributed or available retail stores on Monday. But you can see this is a trend. I think that we can anticipate this being legalized for adult use here in PA relatively soon. There is some legislation pending. Also, we are anticipating some news very soon about the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. This is a survey that's conducted every other year. The data for 2021 should be coming out very soon, I believe in the next week or two. The most recent survey was conducted this past fall of 2021. But as you can see, this is how things were looking for past year use of marijuana. I'm not going to show you a lot of slides about the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. I thought this one just kind of gives a pretty good snapshot. They also look at 30-day use, lifetime use, daily use, and all that. This is just past year. 6th grade, 8th grade, 10th, and 12th over the last several years. So 2015, 2017, and 2019. And as I said, we're very interested to see what 2021 looks like, because this is pre-COVID. Everything we're looking at on this chart is pre-COVID. So I can tell you that I attend those parent support group meetings regularly, and the stories that I hear every week have really changed in the last couple of years. I would say 5 or 10 years ago, I was mostly talking to parents whose kids, when I say kids, any age, have been using different substances. And it was a lot of heroin, a lot of, drugs that are really derailing lives. The shift I have seen in the parents of kids who are using cannabis has blown my mind. I can't believe the difference. The parents' kids are younger. They're starting younger. They're cavalier about it. They don't think there's anything wrong with it. They think it's helpful. They think it helps them. They really believe it helps them with stress and anxiety. Who hasn't experienced some of that in the past couple of years? So I'm very, very anxious to see. I hope I'm going to be pleasantly surprised and it won't have escalated, but it will be interesting to see. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about cannabis. And one of the things that is misunderstood is that it is not, some people believe it is not addictive. You can't become dependent on it. You absolutely can become dependent or addicted to it. So we know that 9% of those, any of us over the age of 12 who smokes cannabis might have some addiction problems, but might have cannabis use disorder. If we start using before, when we're in their teen years, then that risk factor goes up to 17%. There are a number of other studies that show larger numbers, a larger percentage of people. I'm giving you kind of a more conservative one. I don't like to cherry pick data. I could really shock you with some numbers, but I'm giving you something that's pretty conservative and a pretty solid study. But I also want to look at how cannabis use in conjunction with other substance use might affect that. So the blue bars on this graph, I promise I don't have too many more graphs. The blue bars on this graph show someone smoking cigarettes over here with no cannabis use, smoking cigarettes and using cannabis. And you can see how much the use of cigarettes increases. Same goes for binge drinking. For binge drinking without cannabis use, binge drinking with cannabis use. Heavy alcohol without cannabis, heavy alcohol with cannabis use, and again, with other illicit drugs. And cannabis is a really interesting substance. It's a plant, but it has THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient. That can display in many different ways in a person who uses it. In some people and in some strains, it might be like a stimulant. It might be more like a depressant. It might be more like a hallucinogen. So there are a lot of different feelings that go with it. Even when someone tries it and the person sitting next to them tries it, it could be the exact same strain or substance, but one feels very different from the other. So it's really all over the place. You can absolutely have withdrawal symptoms from using cannabis regularly. Some of these are indications of what that might look like. I can tell you that cannabis was absolutely one of my son's drugs of choice. And right before he went off to treatment, we had a pretty miserable family vacation together because he was heavily addicted. And because he was with me and his dad and his sister, he wasn't using, at least not as much, at least it wasn't in front of us. And he had all of these symptoms other than weight change because it was not that long that we were away. But he absolutely had the insomnia, the irritability, the flu-like symptoms. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't stay awake. He was absolutely miserable. And this is from cannabis. And we know short term, there can be a lot of impact on memory loss. It can elicit some anxiety, some really severe anxiety, changes in mood and so forth. My son had Visine bottles all over the house. He blamed it on allergies, but it was absolutely because of the red eyes. But in the long term, you can see some really detrimental impacts, including a decline of your IQ up to 8 points. That's not something to take lightly. I mean, that is really disconcerting, especially with this young developing brain that we are feeding this really potent substance. We're going to talk about the potency in a little bit. Amotivational syndrome is definitely a factor because if someone is having consequences to their cannabis use, such as getting caught with it in school, getting into trouble at home, maybe even getting in trouble with the law, what is the motivation to change or to seek help from a therapist? It can be very, very challenging. And just a sort of a failure to launch sort of syndrome, this lack of interest in outside things or natural ways of feeling good. So there also is something I want to make you aware of called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. This is something that started really confusing emergency room departments for a while, and they were seeing people come in with this involuntary, constant vomiting. So kids call it scromiting, which means screaming and vomiting. What happens is some people have this reaction where you might think that cannabis is something, and it is supposed to be something that helps calm down nausea. But in some people, when they're using higher doses with higher frequency, they have the opposite effect, whereas they vomit really consistently. And I mean, till they're dehydrated, till they're having dry heaves. And the only thing that seems to help them, and it's interesting how it's almost intuitive for them, is to take a hot shower or a hot bath. We hear that a lot, that is what helps them feel better. But we're seeing this more and more often, and it's very confusing to family members who don't understand what's happening with their loved one. So let's talk about the plant itself, the cannabis plant. It has hundreds of chemicals in it in its natural state. When you dry the plant, it has hundreds more chemicals. And when you light that dried plant on fire, it has even more chemicals that are elicited from it. So CBD is cannabidiol. That is not a psychoactive ingredient. You cannot get high from CBD alone. This is something that may have lots of medicinal qualities. We know a little bit about it, but we need to know a lot more. There are a few things to be concerned about, such as liver, impact on the liver and things like that. But I'm sure you've all seen CBD products. You may be using some of them. This does not get you high, but just be aware that there are some products, they're not really federally regulated. They're not really being oversought for the different content or different materials that might be in it, different substances. When they are occasionally tested, there have been traces of THC. So THC is tetrahydrocannabinol. That is the psychoactive ingredient. That is what can get you high. So I'll talk more about the hemp plant that the CBD products are coming from in a moment. But just looking at some trends with cannabis use, there is definitely more acceptance among all generations. Many parents, grandparents, and their kids and grandkids are all feeling like this might be helpful and helpful. So they might be more willing to accept it and use it. Access absolutely is increasing when we have medical marijuana legalized in this state, whether it's at home in the medicine cabinet or elsewhere in the home, but also among friends, peer groups. The legalization makes it much more appealing and reduces that perception of harm. Again, there's that perception of harm coming down, and we're going to talk about the potency in just a moment. Really presents a lot of challenges with the workplace. You're going to see that one of the reasons that people can cite that the need for medical marijuana is chronic pain. And we know folks like truck drivers have chronic pain. And what happens if a truck driver is prescribed medical marijuana? Does that mean that they're now impaired when they're driving? Bus drivers, other things, so there's a lot of work being done in the workplace to determine, how do we manage this and what is appropriate or inappropriate for medical marijuana use. So challenges with field tests, like sobriety tests so if someone is driving erratically, it's very hard. There's no breathalyzer for cannabis, for THC. So that requires a drug test or urine test. And so it does create some challenges in that way. So let's help to understand this plant. So cannabis is the plant that we're talking about. Marijuana is also known as cannabis. We don't like to use the word marijuana quite as much these days, just because it has a lot of stigma attached to it. It came about in the, I think, 60s and 70s when Mexico was kind of being demonized for bringing this plant into our culture. And so marijuana was kind of this made up name that came from it. So we like to talk about it as cannabis, but our government refers to it as marijuana. We have medical marijuana, all that kind of stuff. But just so you know, the plant is called cannabis. Hemp is a cannabis plant, but a plant that has less than 0.3% THC is considered a hemp plant. That is the cannabis plant that is called hemp because it has such a low potency of THC in it. I'm sorry, my allergies are really bad right now, so I'm a little froggy. Hemp is really an interesting thing. It's very fibrous. It's used in things like textiles and paper, construction products, and you see it in body care and food products. And CBD was made legal in 2018 through the Farm Bill, and that was so that it would be It would not be scrutinized for farming for some of those things that I just mentioned. And as long as the plant is kept below 0.3% THC, it could be used for these things. But our cannabis industry got very clever, and they found some ways to use that hemp plant to really distill down the traces of THC that were in it to make it more potent. So there was a lot of work being done in legal channels to try to make some of these products illegal, but you can currently get most of these kinds of things that I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides that are available online right now. So Delta 8 can be quite potent, actually. It is a concentrated THC, that Delta 9 THC that we're familiar with. This is a Delta 8. So it's part of the hemp plant, and it can come in things like gummies, tinctures, and vapes. And then there's Delta 10 THC, which is also derived from cannabis, but it's really kind of hard to concoct. You don't see it quite as much, and it does not get you as high as Delta 8 does. It will get you high, but it's a more sedative feeling, whereas the Delta 8 is a bit more of a euphoric high. Then there's also something called THCO that is produced by combining acetate, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, anhydride, I'm not sure, with Delta. It's some chemical that they combine with Delta 8 THC. So this is more like a psychedelic effect, so like a hallucinogen. It's much more potent than regular THC or even that Delta 8 that I just described. Some users report it feeling like hallucinations, anxiety, dizziness, sedation, vomiting, seizures. They're all over the place with it. This product, for example, I am certainly not promoting this product, but I just want to point out these things are available online. You go online, you look it up, you click a box that says you're over 18, and it is available to order online. So where there's a will, there's a way. If folks want to get their hands on something that will alter their mood, it is available out there. And there are, as I said, legal channels trying to circumvent this and make some of these products illegal. And I want to mention kratom. This is not derived from the cannabis plant at all. It's actually a tree from Thailand, from Southeast Asia. But it is often sold in the same shops that have CBD products, the Delta 8 products, and so forth. So I'm just bringing it up to let you know that it does come from another plant, but it does have a lot of concern around it, because in higher doses, it can really create some problems for folks. There's a bit of misinformation out there. Some people are kind of using this as a home remedy to detox from opioids, such as heroin. So people will use this as a way to detox from that, and they're seeing it as a medication-assisted treatment, such as Suboxone, but it actually is not really proven to be effective in that way. And treatment centers are really not using this. Like I said, this is done more as a DIY, do-it-yourself kind of a thing. So the potency of cannabis has changed dramatically. This chart is only showing through 2018, so it's 4 years old already, but these are numbers, percentages coming from the Drug Enforcement Agency when they look at cannabis that they have seized throughout the years since 1995. The green bar is showing you the potency level, the amount of CBD in cannabis. The blue line is showing you the amount of THC, the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis. And you can see what's happening here with the difference. It's really been escalating. You can see also a very big difference between the dried plant. This is not what it looked like 30, 40 years ago, for sure. This is the dried flower. And here you have a concentrate. So I want to explain what concentrates are. So back in the 60s and 70s, the plant was a lot more the way it was originally intended to be. It was not yet being altered through botany and so forth and hybridization. So the THC amount in those was about 1%. So it was really low THC, potency THC. In the 80s and 90s, it got up to about 3%. Today, the average THC level in the dried plant is about 13%. The highest they've been able to get it to through botany is in hybridizing is about 30%. So I can tell you, I mentioned earlier that my son is in recovery. He got sober 12 years ago. He never used any of these concentrates because they didn't exist yet. Or if they did, they certainly weren't available on the street quite yet. I'm sure they're being formulated somewhere. But this was even before his time. So not only is this not mom and dad's cannabis, this is not your older brother or sister's cannabis. This is really a different product. The concentrates are made by taking that dried plant, putting it in a tube, stripping it with a butane, with a solvent such as butane. So the butane is stripping the plant of its THC, condensing it down at the bottom. They cook that down to get these concentrates like oils. And here, I'll just show you real fast what some of these look like. It can look like oil, butter, wax. These are all kind of the street names and medical marijuana dispensary names for these kinds of things. So they're all these different waxy and oily products that you then heat and smoke or vape. You can use them in a vaporizer. I'm going to go back to this to show you this cartridge. Their kids call them carts. So this has a thread on it. This threads into an e-cigarette or vape pen, and that is how these can be consumed. So the concentrates can have THC percentages of up to 80. So this is even 85, 90. So this is a really, really potent substance, much, much quicker and stronger high. I want to make a special note about edibles. We do not have edibles legalized in Pennsylvania yet, but our kids are getting them. They're getting them through friends from other states sending them, or they're getting them by crossing state lines. Currently, they could go over to New Jersey. It's illegal to bring it across state lines, but that it absolutely is it was getting into Pennsylvania before New Jersey legalized. So I'm quite sure it'll continue to happen, if not increase. Edibles are important to know about because the packaging is not very obvious. Sometimes it looks like real gummies and young kids can get their hands on them. Also, people even who know that they have THC will be eating these and they'll think like, well, I'm really not feeling this. I'm not getting high. So they'll eat some more. The problem is when it's being metabolized as a food through our bloodstream that way, through our digestive system, it takes longer to feel the effects. So if you keep eating them and having more THC in your body, by the time it does have its impact, you're really feeling very sick. And many people do end up in the emergency department if they've overdone it. They get toxic with too much THC. So we've already taken a look at that. So I can remember back in the day, cigarette ads targeting young people like me when I was a kid, and I wanted to be cool and smoke a cigarette like my parents or like Joe Camel. This was definitely frowned upon and eventually started to go away. But guess what? We now have big vape and big cannabis kind of jumping into the game. In fact, many of the companies, the cigarette companies, are buying up the vaping and cannabis products that are out there. So they know what they're doing. These are called Lucy sticks. These are nicotine products. And these are gummies that we're looking at, but you can see how much they look like candy, like they're for kids. And because they know the kids are very vulnerable to becoming addicted to this stuff. And, we see all these different signs out there of how healthy it looks and the way it's promoted. And there's somebody with a lab coat, a stethoscope, because it's medical. And I'm not trying to be glib here. I know that there absolutely may be some potential as medicine, using CBD and some other pieces of this. But, for kids, it is just not a great idea. Their brains are developing. There's a lot of confusion around it and a lot of misinformation. Talk more about medical marijuana in just a couple of slides, but here's some more products that are out there. It always looks very, very healthful, and perhaps it may be helpful to some folks, but we just need to be very cautious about some of the risk factors involved. And I was talking about Philip Morris and other marketers out there. They know that just like alcohol, just like tobacco, just like fast food, even 80% of their product is being consumed by 20% of their customers. So the 20% is what they're after. The 20% of people who are going to love this product, be really committed to it and loyal to it. And that is who they are targeting so that they can increase their sales. So a note about medical marijuana. This was legalized in 2016 and became available through dispensaries in 2018. In Pennsylvania, we currently have these different forms: oils, tinctures, topicals, dry leaf. Dry leaf is the most popular form in Pennsylvania, liquids, and pills. So it comes in many different forms here in PA. There are 23 different medical conditions that can qualify you for a medical card. When I say you, I mean anyone over 18 can qualify for a card. Those under 18 can also qualify, but they would need a caregiver. So then the caregiver is given the card as a sort of a representative for the person who's under 18. And a caregiver can actually have cards for up to 5 different medical marijuana patients. So these are the conditions, and of those conditions, these are the 4 most commonly cited for why medical marijuana is purchased in this state. And I'm pointing these out because what concerns me quite a bit is this: anxiety disorders. And we're hearing quite a lot from clinicians who work with teens who have problems with anxiety, and they're using medical marijuana for their anxiety. And what I want to talk about is the fact that we just don't have a lot of evidence that THC products especially would be helpful for these kinds of things. Potentially with CBD, again, that does not get you high, but THC products, unfortunately, there's still that confusion. That's why I spent some time explaining the differences between CBD, which comes from that hemp plant, compared to THC, which is psychoactive. So just saying medical marijuana doesn't really help us to understand what's being used. We need to look at the contents. We need to look at the ingredients and the potency levels. And medical marijuana dispensaries do list all of their potencies. So you can go on their website or enter their shop. You can't go into the shop unless you have a card, but once you do, you'll see all those different percentages of CBD and THC. So really important to be aware of that. But the reality is we just do not have enough evidence to definitively say that it is helpful for these 4 disorders. In fact, there are a number of studies, you can see some of them listed here, that tell us that there is at least correlation, potentially causation between cannabis use and some of these, and I'm talking about THC here, with psychosis, schizophrenia, anxiety, and depression. So if there is an underlying genetic risk or there is some family history of some of these disorders, then the person using cannabis is at much greater risk of sort of that being a catalyst for some of these disorders coming into fruition. So really be cautious about some of these things. So now I want to share with you, this is just, I think, 4.5 minutes long. This is a video of a young man who very graciously allowed us to interview him and share his interview with you. There's a longer version that is on our one of the links that I'm going to be sharing with you in the chat. You'll see it on the program that we called Kids Cannabis and Solutions for Anxiety. And his name is Albert. He's 18 years old and he's a senior in high school. And he gave us full permission to use this and share this with you. He is someone who had a lot of struggles with mental health, anxiety, and other things, and started using cannabis pretty excessively. And then when things went awry, he thankfully got some help and no longer uses it, no longer uses substances. But I'm going to just play this for the next 4.5 minutes and you'll hear from Albert. Here we go.
I've always kind of had mental health issues with, I first kind of was discovering that in 7th, 8th grade, middle school. And I was still discovering different stuff. I didn't really know what mentally was affecting me or what it was called or anything. But then I did some therapy in 8th grade. And that was like 8th, 9th grade is when I started to like recreationally like use weed, because I was just kind of like with all the people around me, and it was sort of just the thing to do. And I just wanted to like try it. And then throughout like high school and like the end of middle school, my mental health situation was getting pretty bad. And I more turned to like weed to sort of self-medicate and not really just for fun anymore. And even when I was doing it with other people, it was still just like, I need to feel something. I need to kind of get out of my own body and my head and everything. I'm pretty sure it was just like lots of other people were doing it, like kind of that like cliche, like peer pressure thing. But it was more just like it was there, and I kind of just wanted to feel something. And then once I like tried it, it was just like feeling where nothing really mattered, and I can just kind of be whatever. It was kind of like freeing, and that turned out to be not the best thing. So
Did it seem like you were chasing that feeling?
yeah, definitely. Because once I like got there, it was kind of like, wow, this is amazing. I need to always feel like this, instead of finding ways to work on stuff and like feel like that in a good way. I just decided to do the easy option of weed. So. I definitely say with kind of with my parents that I would want to just tell them that everything's going to turn out to like be okay, and just kind of keep supporting me through everything, even though it's definitely going to get a lot harder in the future. But just kind of stick with me and try not to like give up, that sort of thing, because that's definitely what helped me most throughout everything, was just like knowing that their support was there. And then I would definitely just tell myself, because I'd probably just tell myself to kind of just be myself and not worry about other people, even though I think I would just the old me would just tell me to leave and just not believe it. But like I would kind of just say, try to make a change in your life before you're kind of forced to. Probably the best way to kind of tell someone that's like dealing with like mental health struggles and like trying weed is sort of just showing them all the other options. Because I feel like as soon as like someone gets their like mindset on it, like, oh, there's this like super easy thing that you can do to like just make it all be better, but kind of just showing them that like long term, like weed only sort of lasts for however long you do it, and it's like a dependable kind of like substance. So you have to kind of like tell and like show your children that it's not like sustainable for the long run, and that you kind of have to work through the bigger mental health issues before like trying anything else, or because that's not really going to work. Even with like regular like medications, you still need to put in the work to make yourself change before some outside substance can help you.
So I just love what he said there. You still need to put in the work to make yourself change before some outside substance can help you, you know, from the mouths of babes, right? I mean, that is just a beautiful sentiment. And I think that it's just so true about when we're talking about anxiety, especially, or other ways that kids are looking for some way to stop their pain, whatever their pain is: social anxiety, stress about school, stress about cannabis, trauma, you know, that they're trying to erase or not feel, or whatever that might be. And, you know, guess what? A shot of vodka will also make you feel like you're not having problems for a little while. But it's just not sustainable. And I think that's what Albert is saying here, is that, you know, he had to do the work. It's not easy for a young person to really dive into those deep feelings, especially after they've been misusing substances for a while. It's really hard to get away from that, feel those feelings and address it. But that is growth. That is how we heal, right? And develop in our resiliency and move forward and face life's challenges. So I love that he said that. So thank you to Albert out there. So, when we look at AOD refers to alcohol and other drugs. So the spectrum of adolescent substance use, basically. There are ways to look at primary prevention. For some of you, perhaps this is preventative. You're just learning about this so that you can stave off any problems with your child. That is fabulous. There might be some concern. Maybe there's some mild use that's escalating a little bit and some consequences haven't worked out. So maybe there needs to be a bit of a brief intervention, some sort of assessment perhaps. And especially once substance use starts to increase and the consequences don't mean anything. And that's pretty much the definition of addiction, is continued use despite negative consequences. That could be a lot of different substances, and certainly is applicable with cannabis use. If there have been consequences, if everyone in the family is wringing their hands, but the person who's using it, then that's a problem. And there might need to be some sort of intervention, such as a therapist that they might be willing to see. And if they're not willing to see, then there might need to be some consequences. And I can tell you that we were definitely in this section with our son when we hired a professional interventionist to come in and help us to have those hard conversations with him. And really grateful that he agreed to go to treatment. But it's not easy for parents. And a reminder that, I'm available to talk with. We have a lot of resources on our website. If you need help getting someone to help you, put that oxygen mask on yourself first, to take a breath, to, realize that the sky is not falling. We have identified a problem, and we're going to get some resources and move forward. So just some talking points. I already mentioned this, that we really want to get away, and I can't believe I said it earlier, but we don't want to say recreational marijuana because it just connotes this real fun, it's safe, it's fun, it's outdoorsy or whatever. It's adult use. It is meant for adults. It is actually not meant for anyone in particular, but it is certainly not meant to be used by young people. So, our perspective as parents is really important here. We would like to believe that the school can make all the difference, and all the prevention projects in the world at schools can make a difference. We truly are, as parents, their most important educator. They don't always act like they're listening, but they're listening and they're watching. They're seeing us model things. So I always like to bring up this suggestion that to model a good coping mechanism might be walking into the family home and saying, wow, I had such a stressful day. I'm so sick of looking at screens. I'm going to go take a walk. Does anybody want to come with me? Just to model that healthy behavior, that rather than like, I've had such a rough day, I'm going to pour a glass of wine, or I'm going to hit my vape pen for a while, or something like that, just to express those healthy choices that we can make to cope with stress and anxiety or other feelings that we're having. And then just making it very clear what the expectations are in the home, that we've made a decision that we're not going to allow illegal substance use in our home. That would be underage drinking. That would be underage cannabis use. And I'm going to hold that line. And we're going to talk about it if somebody's violating that agreement. So there's a lot that we can do to be really clear, to not necessarily be punitive, and also to not be judgmental about this. If we are using a lot of language that really just sounds like trash talking somebody who's addicted to anything, our kids are not going to come to us and talk about a sibling that they're worried about, or a friend that they're worried about, or about their own use. So if we have an opportunity, even if there's like a celebrity who has a fall from grace and it's related to substance use, to sort of take that opportunity to say, well, I hope that person gets some help. It sounds like they're really struggling, and hopefully they have family that'll help them get the care that they need, and there are so many ways too that we can, just take opportunities to clear the way for open conversation. And it is, by the way, appropriate if asked about your own use to be honest. Perhaps there was no use, but if there was, to not necessarily get into the gory details of it, but yeah, this is what I did, and this is what I learned from it, and this is what I maybe wish I did differently. There's a lot of research that says that kids need to hear the truth. They don't need to hear all the details, but they do need to hear the truth. And you want to foster that honesty and openness. So social norms are an important thing to talk about with kids too. I know that when we first became aware that he was smoking cannabis, he was trying his best to convince us that everybody does this. This is so normal. And a lot of kids believe that. That is them trying to validate their use. The reality is, we saw it in the numbers, not all kids smoke cannabis. It's only about a third that even ever try it in high school. So you really need to dispel that myth, or just not buy into the myth that this is what everybody does. It's not. Also, role playing is a really helpful tool. So kind of, how, if you were in a situation where, saying to our son or daughter, if you were in a situation where somebody was offering you this and you didn't want to try it, how would you say that? How would you go about that? And if they're not comfortable role playing with you, maybe they have a really good friend who also is aligned with them, and the two of them can sort of work that through, or even have a safe word or some way to get out of a situation where they're feeling uncomfortable. Sometimes this happens, kids are friends for years, and then a couple of people from the friend group start to experiment with substances, and it gets really tough for our kids to say no, or to have that language to use to find a way to not pick that up, or and it's so we can make it much more complicated than it needs to be. And I love what I heard one time from a therapist who said, if you have a friend who's really pushing you to try something, like, come on, just have this, just take one hit from the vape pen, or just have one beer, for the person being asked to turn it around and say, why is it so important to you that I drink? Why do you care if I smoke or not? I don't want to, so kind of to turn that around, I think, is a great idea. Motivational interviewing. I love this idea of just kind of asking open-ended questions. And here's this acronym that goes along with this, ORS, which means open-ended questions. So something like, help me to understand what that felt like for you, or why you wanted to try that, or what you think might be good about this or bad about this. Affirmation, like, okay, what I heard you say, and that's also reflective listening. What I heard you say was this. Did I get that right? And then kind of repeating back, what I'm hearing is this. And when we're having these conversations, I usually have a slide up here that says this other acronym, which is WAIT. Why am I talking? Pose the question, but then really thoughtfully listen. You don't have to jump in and refute everything they say, or, start having a dialogue about this. It's really just listening and being curious, and then taking some time to digest that and to think it through, and maybe formulate, what your next thoughts might be, or your next response, or what kind of consequences there might be to continued use, that sort of thing. And just the empowering language of, you are the only person who can decide what you want to do. So this comes up a lot. The gateway. Is it a gateway drug? Well, I love so much what we heard from a young woman who was one of our panelists, kind of like Albert, but this woman was in recovery from addiction. Like, she was definitely addicted to drugs and alcohol. And this was about a year into the pandemic, when she was seeing a new therapist for her anxiety. And she said to the therapist that, she was really stressed out and all this. And the therapist, knowing her history, said, you might want to try medical marijuana. And this girl thankfully said, I can't do that. I have a problem with drugs and alcohol. So I love what she said, though. She said, getting high is a gateway to getting high. And that just says it all right there. So, say what you will about this substance or that, whatever the substance is, once you like that feeling, you might want to try it again, and you might need a little bit of a higher potency. So I'm going to just jump through these because, boy, we're really close to 8 o'clock, and I'm hoping some of you have some questions for me. But yeah, scare tactics don't work. We need to have calm, thoughtful conversations. So just in closing, what I'd like to think about is, are we seeking pleasure, or are we seeking true happiness? So, that high that might come with cannabis or any other kind of substance is quick, it's short-lived, it needs to be repeated if you want to sustain it. The true goal is really happiness. And I'm sure a lot of people know who Bruce Perry is now, because he co-authored a book with Oprah Winfrey called What Happened to You? But he says, wouldn't it be great if all of our behaviors were respectful of our biology? And that just means about that developing brain. We know the kids' brains aren't fully developed until they're 25 years old. So we want to keep it healthy. And I don't like that language that when we're talking to our kids. When we're talking to our kids, you are so lucky. You can create really healthy pathways in your brain. You have this great opportunity to learn about meditation and learn about other ways that you can deal with your stress and anxiety that don't involve getting high, don't involve escaping. And that expression that what fires together wires together, that's all about that brain chemistry. I think a lot of us would like to have learned how to speak a different language when we were 10 years old. That would have been a lot easier. It also would have been a lot better to learn about healthy coping skills when we're young. So I hope we'll take advantage of that while our kids are still able to do so. Anyway, boy, I really got us down to the wire here. I'm going to stop sharing. Dr. Boyd, I would love to invite you to the conversation here and see if you have anything. And please, folks, any questions that you have at all, please drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'd love to hear from you. Oh, Dr. Boyd, you're muted. I don't know if you're speaking.
No, I'm not talking. I was not talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, we'll see if anyone has any questions, while we have you here, so we can give it a few minutes and see if anyone has anything.
Can you talk about some of the resources in the district that might be useful to parents that have some of these concerns?
Sure. I know on our website, we have a variety of pages. If you go to our counseling website, there's some information that you can access. I know our special ed page also has links to different things. And again, this series that we are presenting with the PV Path to Health and Wellness, the sessions that we had last week, and then this week, of course, they are recorded, though they will be posted on our website. And then we have other presentations coming up next week. And again, Kim, as you had shared, the mock bedroom, some of those things, are, again, additional resources. One thing I would like to share is that, Kim and I have worked together before, be a part of the conversation, has been part of Perkiomen Valley School District, but their website is amazing. And if you have the opportunity, I would invite and encourage you to go to that website. Just start looking at it. And as you begin to look at one thing, it leads you down a pathway to other resources. So a wealth of information, and one that's been very valuable, I know, to our Perkiomen Valley community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boyd. It's a great question. How can you tell if your teen is using this? Well, it presents in a lot of different ways. It can be, I think I shared some of those slides about some of the signs. Let me just get back to that. Certainly the smell is not as obvious anymore, so that makes it a lot trickier. Actually, I don't think I really shared a lot. I apologize for that. I really didn't say a whole lot about warning about the signs of use, but it would be, it could get into some weight loss and things like that. It can be sleeplessness, irritability, just seeing them be a little bit more flat emotionally. It can, if it accelerates, there might be some aggression, some paranoia, some assertiveness. And definitely, though, I think the most common markers are amotivational, as I said, lethargy, and I can tell you just from personal experience with my son, it was just a flatness. It was just a, the spark was out of his eyes. It was very much, and just trying to keep his distance from us, because I'm sure that he was a bit paranoid about us smelling it or finding it, or recognizing that, dilated pupils or another thing. But if you're seeing these things, any of these things, by all means, do not have a conversation while they might be under the influence. It might be when you're feeling like talking about it because you're upset. It's also a good indication that it's not the best time for us to be talking about it when we're upset. So I know that the first time we became aware, we sat our son down immediately, and I didn't know any of this back then, and it was the wrong time to do it. He wasn't even fully cogent, when we were talking with him. But yeah, it's a lot more isolation, and like I said, just flatness, just that spark is gone. And by the way, when they start using some of these substances, they might actually feel better than they've ever felt before. So it doesn't always look problematic until the use continues, the dependence grows, and so on. Let's see. Best path to start on when your child comes to you and wants help to stop vaping. Great question. There are some resources to quit. We have a section on our website. I'm going to pull it up and pop it into the chat called "It's All About Vaping." And there are, let's see, we're going to find it here. Let's find it. We've got, some ways to how to stop and all that sort of thing. Let me put it in the chat. There's the vaping section. There are lots of nicotine cessation programs out there that are helpful. And it's great that they want to stop. And if vaping is, it's interesting when you say vaping, because my mind immediately goes to nicotine, but that is not necessarily what's in a vape pen. A vape pen is a device for smoking things. It could be smoking nicotine, or it could be cannabis. So if it's specifically that they want to stop with nicotine is a very, very, very addictive substance. And it's just such a shame that these vape pens came along, because our kids were not those numbers were going way down, the traditional tobacco, cigarettes. Let's see. Yeah. So if your child wants to stop, that's really great. If you want them to stop, then you're going to need to talk with them about, how this might have some detrimental effects, and there might need to be some consequences to it. All right. Are there any other questions? Here, I'm going to show you. I'm going to share my screen one more time and show you where that section is on this website. Okay, so this is the vaping page that I just put in the chat, clearing the air. You'll find an old presentation that was specifically about vaping. That was with our friend Dave Fialco. He's a terrific presenter. You scroll on down here and you'll find quit smoking and vaping now. And you'll see all these different links to different ways to get help with quitting. Just wanted to show you because I realized it's a little bit buried on this page because there's a lot of information on here. So I hope that was helpful. I'm not seeing any other questions.
Well, Kim, I'd like to say thank you for joining us this evening. I'd like to thank our participants for also joining us. And again, we are recording this, so it will be available for others to view. And again, it's just information that, everyone needs. And I thank you for your time this evening.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.